Okay, this is Brad Jeremy Steedman. This is the Understanding the Fourth Amendment, the speech number 3 for Communications 110. I have 5 people in my audience for the speech. All right. Thanks for coming out. Really appreciate you too, especially and my mom, dad, and Trey. Basically, I'm going to do a speech and kind of teach you a little bit about what the Fourth Amendment is. If you, I'll tell you I'll break it down, tell you the 3 parts of it, and then when I'm done, if you have any questions on it, feel free to ask me. I should have the answer. So everyone understands by now that somewhere along the line you've probably seen a cop show, whether it's Law and Order or Cops or something on TV, where someone reads the suspect their rights. They have the right to remain silent. Anything that says it needs to be used against you. Well, I understand that that particular right actually stems from the Fourth Amendment. Today's society, it is really beneficial if you understand what rights you have under the Constitution. So if you're ever pulled over, if you're ever being interviewed or interrogated, you understand how it all works. You know what the police can do, what the government can do and cannot do to you. Basically, to break it down, a little history on the Fourth Amendment. It's been around for about 250 years. It was ratified in 1792. Thomas Jefferson announced to the world that the Fourth Amendment had been adopted into the Constitution, or more specifically, the Bill of Rights. To start with what it is, the Fourth Amendment basically says the right of people to be secure in own persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And it also says no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause, and that's a very key word, probable cause, and you'll hear that again later on. But upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched or the persons or things to be seized. That sounds like a long, a lot of words and everything, but like I said, I will break that down. You can break the Fourth Amendment, well, I just repeat it down into 3 sections. First section you do is it provides protection to citizens' personal belongings and effects. Second section is prohibits the government from conducting unreasonable searches and seizures, and that's the key part of it. The last part deals with warrants, if you remember, where it describes a particular persons to be searched or things to be seized. All right, so the first part, providing protections to citizens' personal belongings in their home. Basically comes down to the right of the people to be secure in their own person's houses, papers, and effects. This refers to your own body. Anything you have on you. A police officer cannot just walk up to an individual and say, I want to search you. They don't have that right. If you're in your car, a police officer cannot come over, pull you over, and tell you to get out of the car and they want to search your car. And also, the right to be secure in this also goes to your house. They cannot search your house, and even a temporary location, a temporary home, a motor home, a motel room. The police cannot come into a motel room and search your room. They have to have a warrant to do so, or they have to have probable cause. And I'll get a little bit deeper into the different types of probable cause when that comes. Of course, it also falls under the idea of what we call a reasonable expectation of privacy. If the person does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy, it does not count. For instance, right here in our house, if we had a let's say a backpack sitting on the front lawn out there, or something, you have a reasonable expectation of privacy for someone to not look in that. No, that does not count. But inside this house on this table, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy? Yes. Same thing with the doctor records. They cannot look inside your doctor records. Any kind of a financial or bank statement, they cannot look inside of that. So that's where the reasonable expectation of privacy comes. The second part of it, prohibit the government from conducting unreasonable searches and seizures. Now the key word in there is unreasonable. This does not mean unlawful. A lot of people think that it's unlawful to search. No, it's just an unreasonable search. The reason for that is statutes and legislation cannot describe and define every certain outcome or every possible outcome of any type of search and seizure. It's impossible to do so. That's why they can use the word unreasonable in there. That's why laws are in place to ensure the government they follow basic guidelines to determine what's unreasonable or not. Now, again, it goes back to the thing: does the the citizen have a legitimate and reasonable expectation of privacy. That's where you go into plain view or abandoned property. Um, if a police officer is walking down the road and he sees a box on the ground, he can look inside that box and see what's happening because it's been abandoned. It's considered abandoned. Third part of this goes into your warrants. Okay, warrants issued by the courts must be based upon probable cause and specifically describe the persons or property to be seized. Now, the Constitution and the federal government, federal legislation, has basically laid the groundwork for how a warrant search works. That every state has their own little statutes that particularly further define the need for a search. The state of Utah uses Utah Code 7723-201. Now, the idea behind a warrant search is this: when a police officer, a law enforcement officer, wants to, let's say they received a very credible tip that drugs are being sold in a home, or even better yet, here's a better example. The neighbor across the road says that that someone stole his big screen TV, 54-inch plasma TV, and the neighbor over here has it. In order for the police to enter that home, they just can't come in there based off of what he says and look inside the home. They actually have to write out a warrant. So they'll write the warrant out. They'll describe the type of TV it is. They'll describe the person who told them they had it, and they'll describe the location of the house. And what will happen is they'll take that to the district attorney. Will take that over to the judge. The judge will read it and he'll review it and he'll look at it and he'll say, okay, on February 1st or on March 1st or April 1st, on whatever day between this time and this time, you are allowed to go inside that home and you are allowed to look inside the residence for this 54-inch big screen TV. And that's what you do. That's when they come over here, they'll knock on the door, they'll serve the warrant. Here's the warrant, it allows us to come inside the house and look for this big 54-inch TV. Now, what does that mean? Can the police come in here and looking for a big 54-inch TV and open up a jewelry box? No. How about a shoe box or a closed container? No, because there's no way a 54-inch TV is going to fit inside that. That's what prevents them from doing that. Furthermore, say they have a garage out in the backyard. Can the police now go and search that garage in the backyard? No, the warrant does not state that they can search the garage. How about when they come in and I want to do a personal search on her and her purse? No, the police cannot do that either. The warrant states specifically, just like in the Constitution, particularly describing the places to be searched and the things to be seized. I'm going to follow it up. I'm going to conclude this here pretty soon, but I also want to say that we do have exceptions to the search warrant clause. There's roughly about 15 or 16, and these exceptions are basically times when the police don't need a search warrant. You have what we call an incident to arrest. At the time, if I see you busting this guy's head open, I can arrest you and I can search you at that time. That's the incident to arrest. We have what's called a border and entrance search. That applies to like when people come from Mexico into the United States, we can search their vehicles. Or when a person drives into a federal installation, we can search their vehicles. You drive over to the VA hospital, we can search you as you go onto their property because it's called a border and entrance search. You're entering a federal restricted area, and we can search your car. An interest for public safety. Say for instance, I get a tip that there's a bomb getting ready to explode over here, and this person over here has the detonator on. I don't need a search warrant to go over and search for that detonator. There's an interest for public safety. We also have what's called the Carroll Doctrine. That goes back all the way to Prohibition. Basically says that I have the right to search your car if there's a danger of that car being transported. It goes back to like I said, Prohibition, where people would used to run moonshine and alcohol in their cars. It allows you to search a car for that kind of stuff. Anytime there's an emergency situation, you can enter a house. We get a tip that this house is burning up. The police have the right to come in the house. Of course, it's an emergency situation. We can come in here and do that. We can't search the house, but we can enter the house. However, if the police have a lawful reason to be there because they entered the house because the house is burning down, and I come in and I see the police officer sees a meth lab sitting right here. They can seize that meth lab and charge under criminal procedures because they had a right to be there, had a lawful right to be there, and it was in plain view. Stop and frisk. This applies to the Terry Doctrine, Terry versus Ohio. Basically, it's not exactly a search, but it allows a police officer to frisk someone for weapons. Obviously, if the person gives voluntary consent. If I ask a person if I can search them, they say yes, then I can search them. Anytime you're following a vehicle at the end of any kind of hot pursuit, if a police officer is chasing someone for about 5 miles or not even in a car, they're just running from them. Once they grab that person, it goes back to the old proverb, the wicked man fleeth. If you run from the police and we grab you and we have to take you down, we can search you at that time for our safety and for yours. Impounding of vehicle, this also applies. And this is one of those ones exceptions where it doesn't exactly follow the idea of a warrantless search, because what we're doing is we're inventorying a vehicle. Somebody gets a DUI, we got to impound their vehicle. We have to inventory everything inside the vehicle. We open up every container and we write down everything that's in there. It's not technically a search, but we are getting access to everything. Again, I went back to abandoned property. Car out there has been parked out there for 5 years. We can go inside and look at it. And then the last but not least is the plain view doctrine. If a police officer or law enforcement officer is lawfully in an area and they see something that's illegal or they see something that's there, they can seize it as long as it's in plain view. So to basically conclude, it's just like, as I said before, it's really important that you understand everything that's involved in the Fourth Amendment. It provides you a lot of protections in the Constitution. It tells you what the government can and cannot do. It's a little bit different than Miranda. If you want to know about Miranda, I'll tell you that. But it's just that our founding fathers, way back in the day, back when British soldiers used to just go in and kick doors in and pull people out of their homes and stuff like that. That's kind of where the roots of it were in the United States. Founding father says, hey, we're going to start up a new country, and we don't want that kind of stuff to happen. We understand how the government invades our privacy. We want to make sure that in the future, and as we go down to future generations, that the government does not invade the privacy of their citizens. Does anybody have any questions about the Fourth Amendment? Okay, thanks.
Okay.